Welcome. Jerusalem, the city whose name can mean a vision of peace. Yet we know how often in the past Jerusalem has been the subject of terrible wars. In today's psalm, though, we return to the idea of a vision of peace, as the psalm describes an attack by Jerusalem's enemies and a wonderful victory for God's people, or rather for the Lord who wins the victory for them. Today we're going to be looking at Psalm 48. My name's Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. These talks are on the subject of how to understand the King James Bible as we work our way through with studies on the book of Psalms, going through each section of the book of Psalms, word by word and verse by verse. Today, as I say, we're looking at Psalm 48. Psalm 48 doesn't tell us its author, but rather begins with the heading, A Song and Psalm for the Sons of Korah. The sons of Korah, a family of temple musicians, a family who were devoted to providing the worship in God's house, or leading the worship in God's house, the temple in Jerusalem. So this song was for them. It could have been written by King David, or it could have been written by a later king or another prophet. It is very much a psalm of prophecy. It feels to be looking forward, that vision of Jerusalem, to Messiah's rule, to the time when God defeats all of his enemies and sets up his kingdom here on earth. It begins in verse 1, Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in the mountain of his holiness. The mountain of his holiness. That could be translated in his holy mountain. Yes, the city of our God is also God's holy mountain. Jerusalem stands on a hill, and it stands in a prominent place, a strong place for defence on a range of hills. And so the city of our God describes Jerusalem, and his holy mountain describes again that city. And the psalm declares that God is great. No wonder he's great. He's done such wonderful things. He's shown his power in the tremendous victory he's won over the enemies of his people. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. In other words, God's people should praise God for the wonderful things he's done and the wonderful way in which he's rescued his own city, his holy mountain. Holy. That word can mean separated for God. This mountain, this city, belongs to God in a special way. And, of course, we're thinking especially here about the temple. At the time of King David, the temple stood further up the hill, at the top of the hill, or rather the site for the temple, because it wasn't until David's son Solomon that the temple building was actually built. But God showed David the site where the temple was to be built, at the top of the mountain, with David's city, the old city of Jerusalem, below it. And that suggests an early date for this psalm, for reasons that become clear in the second verse. So where has God chosen for his temple, his house in Jerusalem? Verse 2. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion, on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. The sides of the north. You'll see the word sides there has an S on the end. It's not the side of the north, it's the sides, more than one, of the north. Why sides? Well, in the Hebrew, that word for sides is a dual word. It means there's two of them. So this is saying two sides on the north. In other words, a wall reaches a corner at the north of the city. This is the place for the temple. This is Mount Zion on the north of the city. Beautiful for situation. The Hebrew word for situation there means height. And I do wonder whether in England at the time of the King James Bible, if you talked about a situation, you were referring to the height with which something is built. Beautiful for situation. How the temple site stands, commanding over Jerusalem at the top of that hill. The joy of the whole earth. Looking forward to the time when the whole land, indeed the whole world, will rejoice at the rule of the Messiah, God's perfect King. Where is this? At Mount Zion, God's sacred hill, the site of the temple. And Jerusalem is called here not the city of David, but the city of the great King. Who is it referring to? Well, God, of course. Jerusalem is God's city. Yes, the part of the city, the oldest part of Jerusalem, was called the city of David. And that stood below Mount Zion, on the slopes down from it. But the city of the great King, that means God or his Messiah. God rules over Jerusalem. God is the strength and the protector and the defender of Jerusalem. Verse 3, God is known in her palaces for a refuge. A refuge, a safe place. Yes, in the great houses of Jerusalem, in the palaces, the palace where David lived, the palace where Solomon lived, there they know that God is the one who keeps Jerusalem safe. They know that they must look to God and not to the impressiveness of their city for defence. Because God won a great victory to save Jerusalem from its enemies. And we now have a testimony of that victory. Again, the psalm doesn't tell us when in history this victory was. So it could be referring to a specific incident, but more probably it's a general description. It's showing us how God protects Jerusalem, and it reaches its final fulfillment in the time of Messiah, when Jerusalem's enemies will be completely defeated. Verse 4, for lo, look, the kings were assembled, they passed by together. Verse 5, they saw it, and so they marvelled, they were troubled, and hasted away. So what's happening here then? We've got kings who are enemies of God and of his people, and they've assembled together. And the author of our psalm says, lo, look, behold, as if it's actually happening now, as if we're watching it. These great powerful men have gathered around Jerusalem to attack it, to destroy it. They gather together with their plans. They walk alongside it, and they see it, and so they marvel. They marvel. The Hebrew word means they were astounded. They were shocked. They realized that they could not defeat Jerusalem, that they could not overpower its defences. This was a city they were completely unable to attack. They were troubled and hasted away. Troubled. The Hebrew word means they were terrified. And hasted means to go quickly. They ran away. They were so afraid What was it that caused them to be so afraid? Verse 6, fear took hold upon them there, and pain as of a woman in travail. So now we know they had to go away. They were seized with the most intense fear, and they felt pain through their bodies, like a woman in travail, a woman who is giving birth, a woman suffering her labour pains. This tremendous pain came upon them. And that is why these kings, these enemies of Jerusalem, have run away. Who did this thing? How did this happen? Well, the God of Jerusalem, the great king in verse 2, is God himself. And God is the God who rules all the world, who has such great power. God, you did it. Verse 7, thou breakest the ships of Tarshish with an east wind. So what's it saying here? The ships of Tarshish. These are the great trading ships of the Mediterranean. The ships that can go right across vast distances of hundreds of miles. Okay, today we wouldn't think these ships to be very big. They're not big in modern terms. But for the author of the psalm, these were the greatest ships, the most impressive ships that existed in the world at that time. But it only took an east wind. It only took for God to allow a storm to blow. And those ships, their wonderful mast with a tree trunk holding up a great sail, that mast was broken down. Indeed, the ship itself, this wonderful marvel of engineering, was destroyed completely and could be ruined completely by the east wind. If God can send a storm at sea which is so strong as that, then how did these enemies think they could attack God's holy city? God's holy mountain, the special place which of all the places on earth he has chosen for himself. So the author of our psalm can say in verse 8, as we have heard, so have we seen. We've heard about God's power. We've heard about God's greatness. And now we've seen it for ourselves. These enemies came. They wanted to attack and to rob and to destroy. And instead they ran away in tremendous pain. We've seen this in the city of the Lord of hosts. Hosts means armies. God's got his armies of angels. Yes, no wonder these kings were unable to attack the city when there were armies of unseen angels fighting against them in their evil plans. The city of the Lord of hosts, the city of our God, God will establish it forever. Selah. And those victories which David saw, and those victories which later kings of Jerusalem saw when God defended their city from attack, they'll be reproduced in an even greater way in the last days. God has established Jerusalem. God has chosen this to be the place of his rule and the rule of his Messiah, his King. God it is who makes Jerusalem strong and who makes Jerusalem safe, so that forever Jerusalem and the New Jerusalem will be the city of our God. And with that thought, the author pauses with the word Selah. It might just mean a simple pause in the music. It might mean an opportunity to think about what we've just heard. And then he continues in verse 9, we have thought of thy loving kindness, O God, in the midst of thy temple. So now, after the victory over these enemies, God's people have gone to his temple, to the great courts that surround the house of God, the temple building itself. And they've gone there to pray and to thank God and to think about God's loving kindness, his great mercy that he's shown in protecting Jerusalem's people from such a terrible attack. Verse 10. According to thy name, O God, so is thy praise unto the ends of the earth. God's name, his perfect character. God, the God who loves and cares for his people. God, the God who forgives their sins, who gives them a right relationship with himself. God's acted in accordance with his name. God, the covenant-keeping God, the God who made promises to his people and who keeps those promises, the God who never lies. God has shown his perfect character, and so is his praise unto the ends of the earth. Yes, everyone in every nation should join with Israel's people to praise God for his perfect character, for what God has done to save Jerusalem. Thy right hand, God, is full of righteousness. Yes, when God reaches out with his right hand, the hand with which a person acts and does his work, when God reaches out to his people with his right hand, what is it full of? It's full of righteousness, full of goodness. God is handing out his goodness to his people, his kindness to them. So, verse 11, let Mount Zion rejoice. Let the daughters of Judah be glad because of thy judgments. Yes, God's acted in judgment as a judge acts. When a judge acts, he acts to punish the guilty, but to rescue the innocent. He's rescued the people of Jerusalem and the people of Judah. So let them be glad, let them be joyful that God's acted on their behalf to save them from a cruel and evil enemy. And let them leave the temple. Let them, verse 12, walk about Zion and go round about her. The attacks happened, the enemy's gone away, and now God's people, having thanked God in the temple, go out to inspect Jerusalem, to see what's happened and whether the city's been damaged by this terrible attack. Count the towers. Are they all in place? Tell the towers thereof. Mark ye well her bulwarks. We're in verse 13 now. Consider her palaces. Examine her bulwarks. I had to look at bulwark in the dictionary. It means a defensive wall. There is a defensive wall, or there was, all round the ancient city of Jerusalem. But the Hebrew word has further meanings. It's trenches, the ditches which soldiers would dig for its defence, or its fortresses, the little castle-like structures on the wall to make the city strong. Mark ye well her bulwarks. Examine the defence of the city. Is it still intact? Is it still safe? Is it still secure? Consider her palaces, the great houses of the city. Are they damaged at all? Did the enemy manage to damage them? No. God's salvation was so perfect, so complete, that there is no damage at all. A mighty army rose up led by kings against Jerusalem, and yet Jerusalem has saved the whole city. And so ye may tell it to the generation following. Yes, tell the children about the wonderful things that God has done, that God is a God who they can trust too, who they should believe in, who they should serve. Let them know of the wonders of the good things that God has done. For this God, verse 14, this God is our God forever and ever. Yes, our children need to know, so that they too and their grandchildren and the grandchildren after them may know that Israel's God, the God who saved Jerusalem, is their God. And they're going to trust him always. They declare, he, God, will be our guide, even unto death. Those last two words, unto death, have been a problem for many of the commentators and ancient translators. Although it's clear enough in the Hebrew, a lot of questions have been asked whether it could be understood differently. Some of the suggestions made are that he will be our guide as youth, or like virgins, or maybe this unto death is the name of a tune. Somehow people seem uncomfortable with this phrase. But I have no problem with it as it appears in the King James Bible. The declaration is, God will be our guide even unto death. For our whole lives, we're going to trust God. We're not going to turn away from him in any way. No, we know that he knows the right way for us. He is the one who guards Jerusalem. He is the one who will guide Jerusalem's people. And so we declare, the Lord is our shepherd. We shall not want. We trust him completely to guide us throughout this life. And we've told the generation following, we've told our children that they should do the same. We've seen how God has looked after us, and we want them to know that if they put their trust in this God, the God who defended Jerusalem, the God whose holy mountain Jerusalem is, that he can be their guide for the rest of their lives too. Please write to me. My email address is 333kjv@gmail.com. My name again is Keith Simons. It would be lovely to hear from you, especially if you've never written before. That email address again, 333kjv@gmail.com. Please let me know where in the world you are. If you're in the United States, as most of our listeners are, then please tell us where in the United States you are, which city or which state. But now let me read you the whole of Psalm 48, a song and psalm for the sons of Korah. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in the mountain of his holiness. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion, on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. God is known in her palaces for a refuge. For lo, the kings were assembled. They passed by together. They saw it, and so they marvelled. They were troubled and hasted away. Fear took hold upon them there, and pain as of a woman in travail. Thou breakest the ships of Tarshish with an east wind. As we have heard, so have we seen in the city of the Lord of hosts, in the city of our God. God will establish it forever. Selah. We have thought of thy loving kindness, O God, in the midst of thy temple. According to thy name, O God, so is thy praise unto the ends of the earth. Thy right hand is full of righteousness. Let Mount Zion rejoice. Let the daughters of Judah be glad because of thy judgments. Walk about Zion and go round about her. Tell the towers thereof. Mark ye well her bulwarks. Consider her palaces, that ye may tell it to the generation following. For this God is our God forever and ever. He will be our guide, even unto death.